A little about me. I'm a partnership coordinator with Girls Who Code. I'm just in Shoreline, Washington, and I've been with Girls Who Code for 2 years. Girls Who Code is a nonprofit, and what we're doing is providing free curriculum to schools, libraries, and nonprofits to highlight women in science and teach girls computer science skills. So we do have a few different programs. I'm going to focus on the Girls Who Code after school clubs program. We do call it an after school clubs program. We have schools and teachers who use it in a variety of different ways. We do have some teachers that are using the curriculum in the classroom every day with all of their students. So we are called Girls Who Code. We're highlighting women in science, but we are not exclusive. You're more than welcome to include the whole class too, or just host an after school program for girls. Our clubs are free after school programs for 3rd through 5th and 6th through 12th grade, and they're led by a facilitator. I'm going to use that term facilitator a few times. What that means is that the teacher, the adult in the room, that can be a parent volunteer as well. We're just referring to the adult that's running the club and the club. You don't need any computer science experience or background to get started. You can actually learn with it too. I'm going to highlight our curriculum. We have 3rd through 5th grade curriculum, and then we have 6th through 12th. And so our 3rd through 5th grade, you can see here, we say 5 sessions. We have up to 20 different lesson plans for 20 different sessions. Each session is about a 45-minute to 60-minute lesson. You can kind of edit things out if you'd like. You can also cut things down and just do a few of the activities from a lesson and expand a lesson into 2 sessions too. The 3rd through 5th grade curriculum really is a beginning introduction to vocabulary and computer science concepts, and it's a book club model. What that means is we're using our books. So there is a reading component, and you can use this curriculum. You don't need a computer for it. We have offline activities, but if you do have computer access, we do have scratch activities. So that's another way where you can kind of stretch this out and make it a more robust curriculum and use the offline and online activities, or just do one or the other. If you don't have access to a computer lab, you can also just do the offline activities. For the middle and high school program, it is a minimum of 10 sessions, about an hour to 2 hours per session, because they are building a project. So if you have a little bit, if you have a few more sessions and you have the ability to give them that extra time, they can work on more curriculum. It does go beginner, intermediate, and advanced. So if you do have a 6th grade club this school year in your middle school, and then the girls, some of them move on to high school, you now have 7th graders, they can participate again and learn a new coding language or develop more skills. And it's all self-guided tutorials for the 6th through 12th grade curriculum. And a little bit more about that. I'm also going to go through this for the 3rd and 5th grade as well. This is sort of the cadence of that 1 to 2 hour session that you have with the students. We start off with what we call a sisterhood activity. That's just our sort of marketing language for an icebreaker activity. That's just something to get the students thinking and talking and discussing. And then we do a Women in Tech Spotlight. That's when we're highlighting a woman in science. We are not just looking at historical figures like Ada Lovelace and Grace Hopper. We're also talking about current women in tech. So we're going to be talking about Simone Gertz. We'll talk about Dr. Anna Howard. You can also pull up these women's LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, and see projects that they're currently working on. So that's one of the things I really like to highlight, because the Women in Tech spotlights don't just talk about historical figures. And then that leads into the self-guided tutorial project time. The project that the kids determine they want to work on will dictate what coding language they're going to build. So if, as a group, they decide they want to build a website to talk about their campus or an issue in their community that they're passionate about, they would then learn HTML, CSS. If they want to build a chatbot, like a game, they can learn Python. We also use Thunkable, which is a drag and drop app building program. So if they wanted to build an app, that kind of dictates what lesson they're going to be working on. And then the last 5 minutes are dedicated to what we call a stand-up, which is essentially just a wrap-up. And this is highlighting some of the Girls Who Code projects. For the middle and high schoolers, they are going to be building a project. It's something that they're passionate about. The prompt is, how would you change the world using technology? So we've had 12 of websites about hunger. And so they've created a website where you can go on, pick your location, and say, I'm here, I need to find the nearest food donation where I can collect food for my family, or I want to make a donation, and it'll pull up, they put it in with Google Maps so that you can kind of pull and see where you can make a donation. We have a variety of projects. It's really about what the girls want to come up with. For 3rd through 5th grade, that curriculum is based on our books. So again, we do a quick icebreaker activity. For the 3rd through 5th graders, it does usually involve like moving around, standing up, we getting the shakes out, kind of just getting some energy out, and then we do have a 15-minute read and reflect. That can be group reading, individual reading. It's up to you as the facilitator, as the group leader. We do have 2 books that you can use for curriculum. The Learn to Code and Change the World is our first book. It's been out for 2 years now, and it is a lot of vocabulary in a nonfiction style. The Friendship Code is a fiction book. So you can use one or the other or both and use the curriculum all year long. Then we do 20 minutes of actual work time, coding time, either in Scratch, or if you're not using computers, that's going to be unplugged. And then again, we do kind of a wrap up, which we call the stand up. And all of our curriculum is housed on HQ, which is our website. I'm going to do a little show and tell on that in just a minute too. So this is just about how you can get started. And let me know if I'm off, but I'm guessing not everyone in the room has filled out the application and gotten to the curriculum. We're talking about it and thinking and planning right now, correct?
Correct.
Okay, perfect. So what you need to get started. You need a space. We can't do this in a home or outside. So you make sure to use the school's address. And then for 6th through 12th grade, you do need some technology. So what we're looking at is either a laptop, a desktop, it can be PC, Mac. We can use tablets. We highly recommend using an auxiliary keyboard because coding does require typing, but we can get by with tablets if you're on Microsoft Surfaces or iPads. But 6th through 12th grade, middle high school, we do need some kind of technology, but it is all web-based. So you don't need to download an app or get our software or anything like that. And for 3rd through 5th grade, you need passages. So you need the chapter guides and the books. And then again, that facilitator, that's just you or your co-teacher who's leading the program. On the online form, you're going to see the decision maker role. It sounds like a very powerful person. Unfortunately, you're not. You're just the person that's going to be receiving any shipments at the site. So the reason we have a decision maker and a facilitator is because that we work with a lot of schools, libraries who are using volunteers. So if you're relying on someone from the PTA, someone who is not staffed at your school or within your district, they're going to be the facilitator and you would be the decision maker. You can be both decision maker and facilitator. You can also have co-teachers join you. You can have up to 4 teachers also join you, and I'll explain that when we get into the application. I just threw this slide in real quick because normally I spend more time talking about it, but I didn't want to forget. We also offer you $300 for each club. That is each club that has at least 3 girls in it. And that $300 you can use to purchase those Girls Who Code books. Or we also offer all of the 3rd through 5th grade books available as printable PDFs. So if you don't want to purchase books, you want to use the 3rd through 5th grade curriculum, but you also want to get some robot kits for your classroom, or you want to buy some supplies and have a STEM fair for the 3rd graders. You can use the printable PDF versions. They're printer friendly. They just cut down on a lot of the images and use those for the reading chapters, and then use your $300 to purchase classroom supplies, You can buy gadgets, you can buy little robot kits, and have teachers for 3rd through 5th grade use the money to buy robots, and then they set up like a robot obstacle course. And they had a family science night, and the kids all got to show off their projects. This is also the same for 3rd through 5th graders, so you can use that $300 for additional supplies. You can also use that money just to feed the kids. If you are using this after school and you need snacks, you can use the funds for snacks. You can also just have a big pizza party at the end of the year and have the students show off their Girls Who Cook project. It's really open-ended funding. Again, you just need at least 3 girls in the club. I have March 31st on here because that is our deadline for this school year to get your application in to be eligible for club funds and to use this year's curriculum. April 1st, we're going to switch over already to the next school year and summer. So if you fill out the application online after March 31st, you're going to be into the next school year. You won't be eligible to use any of the club funds this year. So just quick note, we have money on the table, and ideally you're going to sign up before the end of March. Our program is designed to be self. Oh yeah,
we got a question.
When we talked before, you had also said that money could be available for field trips for these clubs. Is that correct still?
Absolutely, yes. Okay. So you have the $300 available for a field trip. It's really open-ended funding. We describe it as it's there to enhance the student's experience. So if you want to use the money to go on a field trip, absolutely. And if you have a group of 30 kids, I would recommend doing 2 clubs online as for the application purposes. You can have them at the same time, have them in the same room, but divide the kids into 2 clubs because then you get $300 for each group. Our intent with that funding is that it's between a group of about 10 to 15 girls. So if you have a larger group, definitely divide them into 2, and then you can kind of pool your resources. I've had classrooms do that where they, you just need to communicate with us if you'd like to use 2 clubs funding, but you can have multiple clubs at a school, that's okay. And we are partnering with Wallach School District. I think we haven't gotten the form filled out yet, but hopefully we can do that soon because then we can offer an additional $100 for each club. So again, just ahead of that March 31st deadline. And then you can use your funding anytime. You just need to submit your reports by the end of June for this school year.
Perfect, thank you.
No problem. And I'll jump in and show our curriculum too. I'm going to go through a few slides about signing up, and then I'll pull up our HQ site. If anyone has questions about signing, which program to start or where to go, we recommend for under 13, we start with Scratch tutorials. For older kids, but still with no experience, again, Scratch is really where you get started with coding. And then if you do have some kids that have more computer science experience, you can use Python, JavaScript to kind of build more robust projects. You also can have older students help out and support with younger clubs. On our end, we just require that there's an adult in the room, and then which is really what most school districts require too. So on the application, you would still be the facilitator, decision maker, person leading the program, and then within the club, you can designate a role of that's a little bit more like a student assistant type role to help out with showing younger kids if you wanted to do that model, or if you are continuing on next year, the girls that participated this year can take on that leadership role, but still also learn, build on a new project. So how to get started? This arrow directional thing is really giving you a lot of extra time. I would say 5 minutes to create an HQ account and the 15 minutes to fill out the club's application. You do that at the same time, and it takes about 10 minutes. Again, on that online application, we just want to make sure that you're an adult that's allowed to work with kids. So use your school district email. That will waive any background checks. Is anyone considering using volunteers from the community or folks from the PTA or parents?
Possibly.
There is a possibility for that, yeah.
So I'm guessing because they're volunteering at the school, your school district will have some sort of background check requirement already. We also have a background check requirement. So if your volunteers have been background checked through the school district, there is a waiver form. You would just send us a copy of that person's background check, essentially. Or we can background check your volunteers too. But it's fairly simple. If you have two teachers that want to work on the same club, so you have teacher A and teacher B, teacher A would fill out the application, and then once the application is complete, this 5 to 10 days to get your approval email. I've never really seen it take longer than 3 days unless you just totally typed the wrong address and we can't figure out that you're actually with a school. But you'll get an approval email with your club code. It's usually WA1234. So then the first teacher that filled out the application can give that club code to any co-teachers who want to also get access to the curriculum, take a look at the project. So you can also share that club code with your volunteers. And then they would just go to our website and say, I want to volunteer with an existing club, and enter in that code and get connected. Prior to launching, so when you're filling out your club application, you can select a launch date. So you can go online later today, fill out the application, and say you want to start using the curriculum April 2nd. You want to start using it in May. That's totally fine. You set your start date, and then your CSS, that's your club success specialist. That's another person at Girls Who Code who's going to reach out to you. In the state of Washington, I work with Stephanie. So she'll message you to make sure you have everything you need. She'll remind you to use your club's fund. If you have questions about what to buy with your club's fund, she can help you with that as well. If you want to pool your resources, if you have two clubs that want to go on a joint field trip and use the $600 plus the $200 from the partnership, so you have $800 there, we want to pool it together, she can help you with that. And then whenever you can adjust your start date too if you want to launch earlier. This is what the Girls Who Code HQ website looks like. There is a question about what country you're coming from because we're international. So we do have clubs in India, United Kingdom, and Canada. So, and we're looking again to make sure you're an adult. So you can click to start a club, and then this is the information we're looking for. You do create a login, and then when you log in after you've been approved, you get access to the curriculum. And if you're on our website, there's a big apply here button. And then we also have a training/webinar to get you started. So I'm gonna hop out of this view, and you're still seeing my screen, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so this is hq.girlswhocode.com. At the end of this webinar later this afternoon, I will email out to Angelica a sort of everything we talked about. I'll link the presentation and I'll put links to where to go on our website. So on here, you would just click sign up and go through the prompt. I'm already registered, so I'm gonna log in and jump in to the curriculum and kind of show you what you're looking at. So this is what your view turns into once you're already logged in and your application has been approved. So you filled out the form, you've gotten an email that says, congratulations, your club's been approved. Your club is Washington number 1234. You log in again, and this is your view. The first thing you're gonna see is your facilitator toolkit. And sort of the first box is launch your club webinar. This is where you can watch a pre-recorded webinar, jump into one scheduled. They happen every week. And we also have a read-through document just to help you get started. We have a checklist. We do have a newsletter which highlights things and reminds you to spend your club's fund. And then down here, we also have claim your fund t-shirt form. So when you start a club, you get a t-shirt, the facilitators do, and then all the kids in the club. So you'll want to take a head count, and then you can just fill out the online form and get that ordered once you've got the club head count settled. If you do have a child ad, it's no problem. Just let us know as soon as you can. It takes us, we're not quite Amazon Prime level, so it does take us a couple weeks to ship things out to you. And then we have just all the resources. You could want a lot of questions, but I'll jump into kind of where the curriculum is. On the sidebar is sort of where everything's organized. And over here, you're gonna see sisterhood activities. So these are just activities you can kind of select, just something to give you an idea of what the introductory activity looks like. And then we also have, this is the printable curriculum for the Girls Who Code books. And you can kind of click through and see, they take you to a PDF doc, but just to give you an idea of what that looks like. And then if you are managing the 6th through 12th grade looks the same, you can also be responsible for more than one club. So if you are doing helping support on a middle school club, but you're also the lead on a 3rd through 5th grade club, just over here under change programs, you would switch your clubs once you've associated those clubs with your account. And then I recommend, once going back to that slide with the timeline, if you plan on 10 to 15 minutes to fill out the application, then give us 2 or 3 days just to get it processed. Again, we're just looking to make sure that your background check, you're using your school district email and the school address, so it would get approved pretty quickly. And then you can spend some time, I give yourself at least 2 weeks before your launch date to look through the curriculum. In total, somewhere between 1 to 2 hours to get started. And that's just time for you to familiarize yourself with the website and take a look at the curriculum and the lesson plans and communicate with your club success specialist, with Stephanie. She's also available. She's happy to do a phone call or a video walkthrough. She's the person you're going to work with once your club has been activated, so you have a club code. But I'm also still available too. Stephanie is more of the HQ expert than I am, so occasionally I will refer to her, but we're both available to help you have the whole Girls Who Code organization. And we have about 5 minutes left, I believe, so I want to leave this time open for any questions. And just again, too, if this is a lot of information, if things come up after, don't hesitate to reach out. I'm happy to answer questions.
Kat, what data do we collect to give to you?
I believe that was what data that you collect to give to Girls Who Code?
Yes.
Correct.
So for us, the students would log in online. So either they're using their email address or their parents' email address to have a login code. In terms of data, once the kids are registered, that's linked with your club, so that once you get 3 or at least 3 kids registered, that activates the club's funding, so that's available. But you don't really need to. We do a very informal survey at the end of the school year, which is more like how did we do, how can we improve. But otherwise, we don't sort of hound you for mile markers or anything like that. If you use the club's fund and you spend the money, we'd love to hear what you did. And if you get pictures, we'd love to see and share. We love that kind of progress. But it's very informal.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
How many lessons are in a session, I think they were called?
Each session is sort of designed around a topic. So they are, in total, there's about 20 for 3rd through 5th grade. We recommend at least 5 of them to get a basis of computer science vocabulary. For 6th through 12th grade, a minimum of 10 sessions. Each one has a activity, an intro activity, and then a discussion question. And then there's about 40 minutes to an hour that you can dedicate to the online activities. In terms of individual activities, each lesson does vary a little bit.
Any other questions? I think that's it.
Well, awesome. And I'll send a follow-up email with all the links to the web pages that I talked about, as well as my contact info. Don't hesitate to reach out if you have questions. If you have an inkling or that you want to look at the curriculum, you aren't 100% sure you want to get started, I would recommend filling out the application because that's the only way I can give you access to the curriculum. If you don't get a club started, you don't have any girls register for your program, that's okay. We would love to hear if there's anything we could have done to help support you, but sometimes it just works out where, you want to see the curriculum, but you can't get it going this year. That's okay. You can reapply, fill out the application again. You apply for each school year. But again, if you want to kind of get into it and look around, just fill out the application. We'll check in with you, but you won't be penalized or anything if you don't get the club going.
All right, perfect. All right, well, thank you so much, Kat, for taking the time to talk with us, and we will send you any questions we have.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I hope to meet you all in person one day soon.
In its early stage where teachers who cared worked extended days without extended pay just to see the students walk across that prestigious stage and not holding regular diplomas. No, see, these were degrees for change. They gave us the tools, watered our seeds, never looked surprised at what their investment would bring, a network full of leaders from the Hill to the CD, educated and ready to meet their city's needs. We changed campuses, brought perspectives to private schools, navigated the unspoken rules of colleges that weren't built for us. With stories too unique for the common avocation, collective determination, and a cadre in formation, we made an impact that could only be measured in scientific notation. We became teachers, preachers, scientists, activists, counselors, lawyers, employers, nonprofit founders, and PhDs. But ultimately, when watered, we became trees. A wise person plants seeds so the descendants will no shade. The investment that was made receives returns every day, and what started as little ripples has now become waves, and generational trajectories have been completely changed. Now this is community development. And it doesn't start with tall buildings, renovations, or detaining our youth. It starts with homegrown leaders unafraid to speak their truth, able to bear fruit because they're connected with deep roots to a city that raised them and respects what they do. When a community stands together, the mountains become movable. Lights in the collective are too bright to be dimmed. See, we didn't love our cities because they were beautiful. Our cities are beautiful because we love them. So don't call us anything that starts with a deficit. Call us scholars. Call us leaders. Call us change. Call us trees. And discover what happens when you decide to water a seed. Call us the future. And watch us as we continue to bear fruit. And what they told us was the desert. Thank y'all.
Right, so just sort of brings back that vision that we're talking about, building those roots. We have that idea, and this is sort of our goal. We're pushing out and we're trying to create students that have a future, against all odds, and making sure that they're capable and that they're open to staying around because they have those opportunities and they have the resources to do that. Just to sort of get us started with this afternoon, we're going to be talking about standards and looking at that kind of stuff and start talking about what's the next step for us as our committee starts working on that.
So this activity here, common themes with practices, kind of addresses or speaks to some of the concerns or some of the, I was a building administrator, and so any great activity I turn and I think, okay, how do I have folks embrace this? How do we find a way to make it fit? There's already so much on any teacher's plate. How do I say, guess what, I'm gonna try to, add to that? Or it's alluding to that there's more to add. So this activity looks at practices. All of our standards, in fact, each envelope here represents all of the practices in math, science, ELA, ed tech, and computer science. All of those sets of standards have practices. Practices, what do we want students to be able to do? So like computer science has concepts and practices. What are the big ideas? What are the actionable things that we want students to be able to do? So we have an activity to be able to look at, if I don't know, let's say that there's 40 strips of paper in here, 40 different practices. Does that really represent 40 different things? Or are there themes amongst those practices? So if there's, let's see, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, Angelica and I thought, and I don't know if anybody stepped up, it's coming back in, or about 10 might be the group size. that maybe group 3 different groups. So if we have 3 groups of 3 or 4, I'm going to have you take these strips and you'll lay them out. And you'll notice they're different colors, so you'll just lay them out. And I want you to start looking for themes within these. And knowing that there's practices across all 5 of these areas, are there themes that you see as you read through them? And then I want you to go ahead and try to group those. Put them into groups that you think these 8 or these 7 represents a theme. And see if you can try to identify, have a rationale, you and your group. We did this with our group of CS leads, 2 weeks ago?
About 2 weeks ago, yeah.
And each group that did it had a different rationale. There's not one way to attack this. So they each had a different strategy for what they were looking at or how they organized. But we're going to ask you to take some time, read through them, group them into themes, and then this poster piece, that's really up to you folks. We had some groups that did that, and we had some groups that just left things on a table and they took some pictures. So that's going to be really yours to decide. Because the power of this is not in the poster. The power of this is in the process of looking through these. And then we're going to have each group share out. What was your strategy? What was your mindset? And what did you see when you got done with looking and examining these practices? So I'm going to leave the grouping up to you. It just might be better to, instead of having a partner, a pair, I think having at least 3 people in the group makes some sense. So if you'll kind of move around and get into that, that will also free up tables that you can use. So you got a group here? Oh, and by the way, Angelica and I don't know, one envelope is missing 1 strip.
We don't know which one though.
But when I go like this, I think, okay, wait a minute, this feels a little heavier. So I don't know.
We'll see.
So here's a group for you. Go ahead and just fold. As we look here, we're not going to ask you to do a poster, but we'd love to have you share what was your mindset? How did you get started? What were you looking for? And how did you build groups? If you take a quick look before we share, it looks like everybody's done something a little bit differently. There's not the same organization at every table. Because just like this morning, this is about perspective. And so the huge takeaway for me is it's not individual things that if I was a classroom teacher, used to be, not any longer, but it's not like I have to then go, I have to do all of those. I have to be thinking smart, thinking strategically with my grade level partners or my other building colleagues. How do we leverage? Because we can't create more time. How do we leverage so we can say and feel comfortable about we're addressing these practices in some really creative ways as we look at different groupings. So if I could pick on you guys to just start first, what was some of your train of thought when you got started? How did you get started?
We tried to look at some of the key, like the verbs, some of the key words in the different practices and kind of group them by keywords similar, like
the skills
actions,
of it.
yeah.
Okay, and I see, 5 different groupings. Do you have kind of a sub-category, a heading, something that if I look from my perspective on the far left, so like Nathan right there, is there what did those represent?
This is like designing and creating.
Okay.
And then we have collaboration and like citizenship. And then here we have like thinking and analyzing. This one was
kind of gathering data
uh-huh.
and building a base. And this one was constructing an argument, more or less.
So wow, if all of those will be mentioned, all those different content areas, when I think of constructing an argument, I think of ELA. I think of writing. In the writing process, we're going to construct an argument. But when we think about, well, no, that exists in a lot of different, we do that a lot during the day and across a lot of grade levels. Thank you very much. How about here? How did you get started? How did you end up the way you did?
We started out doing what Nathan just said, and then realized that this might be the lead title, and started filling in underneath it as the lead element with, or what's the word? What I'm looking for?
We kind of just determined that they were the standards, the computer science
Okay.
standards, and then tried to reconstruct those standards.
Okay. So you then had a strategy for if we take the same color that we think are all been from the same family.
Well, we weren't using the colors, we were reading them. And
Oh, okay,
There's
okay.
a description right there.
Okay,
So it describes a
got it. Okay,
term
thanks.
that seemed like it was the standard, and then these are the elements of the standard.
Okay. And just, you have 4, 5, 6, 7 different kind of sets. So you don't have to go through all of them, but how did you then, like this group here, because folks can't see the reading, how did those get grouped the way they did? What was the common theme or the common element?
Well, we started off the definition from the top and then just tried to classify it by, you know, the individuals by fitting that description there.
Okay. And in the back, how about you guys? How did you get started? What was your train of thought as you started to look for themes?
Well, we started by putting them, just laying them out by their colors, and then we noticed that these ones seemed pretty important, kind of like what they did.
Yeah, okay.
And then we read it, and we kind of thought about where would the other ones fall under these.
Yeah, we ended up in the same place because we pretty much, except for this one, have one pink. So we were grouping by category, and then, wait a second, there should be one pink one.
Well, yeah, so. Now, again, there's no one strategy for this. It is pretty organic, and so and it's interesting too, if you have a group of folks that are working on this with a blend of responsibilities, both administrative and teaching, as opposed to all administrators, as opposed to all teachers, you get a different perspective, which is important because it's always about perspective. So I'm going to give you an opportunity, and we were talking back and forth of whether we think, if we look at the agenda, this would go until 1:30. It may not, but or it might.
There goes.
So from what you've heard, I just want to give you a few minutes to then go back and think, wow, they did it different than we did. Or there's some similarity, but we still have different organizations. Or maybe you want to just kind of walk through the room and take a look at what another group did, and then come back. So if we could do that, just take a view of the other two groups, and then come back and say, do we like what we have, or are we going to make some changes? Not so much to the poster, but just the organizations. And then I think before we push all of these back together, someone, either Angelica or someone, we want to get pictures to just have a representation. So we'll try to get those in an order that we can take pictures from.
This one part is flat.
Others are doing this. And then you're gonna have it presented after a paragraph, and so they tell you that's not. Well.
Okay, well, let's wrap this up a little bit. Does any group feel like you'd want to go back and do some rearranging, or are you comfortable with how you have them? So where would you go next with this? Is there a next step with, let's say, PLC fifth grade teachers? What might you do next? Is there a next step? If we're thinking leverage, it's about finding leverage.
Well, part of it's just recognizing that if the pink ones are the technology, whatever, that there are standards from all sorts of places that fit in with them. So it may be as being aware of these standards and being intentional when you're doing some of these other things.
Yeah, and for me, I think, the number of standards is overwhelming when you look at all of the standards for all of these areas. The number of practices, sometimes I think about what's the easiest thing to digest. A list of practices is a little bit easier to digest. And if I can start to then see that commonality in multiple practices across 5 different areas, it helps me to kind of catch, like, my breathing slows and my heart rate slows a bit, because then I'm thinking I don't have to try to do all of that tomorrow during class. I can now think of it in broader brush strokes of how I can still address standards, that when I'm addressing that top one, I know that there's ways. If I teach third grade, and if my kids aren't walking for a lot of things, but I'm teaching multiple subject areas in third grade, and I can then say, I can find a way to be intentional as I teach it, so that I'm hitting not only that ed tech standard, but I'm also hitting my math and my ELA and my science. And to me, I think that's some leverage. Here's a little bit of, if there is a key to this. If you look on the back side of the green ones, it should have the number 1. Is that correct? A little tiny number 1?
I got nothing.
Oh,
No.
Oh, interesting. Well, then maybe they didn't copy correctly, because they should have been copied off in a manner that looks just like this. If you look here, the little small number on the back side. So math would be green, science is purple. So if you turned science over, you would see, yeah, 2. Little tiny number 2. ELA is blue. So if you flipped over ELA, you should see the number 3. Ed Tech is pink, and I think most of you kind of found those, and those are the ones that rose to the top on a lot of those. So there would be a little 4 underneath or on the back side. And then finally, computer science is the 5th set.
It's yellow.
And those were yellow, and so computer science should have a 5. I think then, just like you had mentioned, if we worked as a building, as a district, if we said, here's the standard that we're going to put at the top, and maybe it's EdTech, well, maybe it's the computer science, whatever, there's no right answer, but if we say, here's where we're going to start. We're going to start with these standards, all of us together. We're going to start with this standard at the top, and we're going to look for some common threads across these other areas. That's our rationale. That's where we start. That's where we try to help folks that may be saying, this is too much, I can't. Well, maybe I can do that, because now I'm seeing ways that my team is helping me to lessen the number of individual things, because we're looking at them from a grouped perspective. So that's really the essence. I don't think we had anything else here. That was the essence of this activity. Oh, and last, how many of you are familiar with Flipgrid? I'll just mention, and if you want to, I don't know if you, do they have this slide? I think
it's linked on there.
So with Flipgrid, you use, it's kind of like a Facebook kind of a thing, but you're going to create a video. You could go to that link, and you might see, Angelica, were you part of the Flipgrid?
I think so.
Yeah. So in our CS Leads group, we use Flipgrid a lot. Mm-hmm. Later today, we're going to talk about standards, and we had a Flipgrid activity that we did at our Leads meeting with standards, as we were trying to come up with classroom-friendly language for the standards. So there you go. So we have a Flipgrid-like account or a Flipgrid chapter for common themes with practices. So if you're interested, you and a partner could create a Flipgrid where you're really, it's kind of like a video selfie, where we get into Flipgrid, it's all free, and then we say, this is what we did, here's how we looked at our practices. Did you have yours?
Mine's not on this one, mine's on the statewide one.
Click on one of these and we'll just show them.
Okay, so our theme that we saw for overall was collaboration, and that includes like students working, thinking together, justifying information with each other, analyzing and interpreting data as a group. Some things for our activity that, or some, I guess, key areas that the activity that we thought about covers is obtaining, synthesizing, and reporting findings clearly, like together with others, communicating information, reading, writing, and speaking, using evidence with others in their group, collaborating around computing various numbers and data, constructing viable arguments and critiquing the reasoning of others, reasoning abstractly in groups, engaging in argument from evidence, and analyzing and interpreting data with others. So the activity that we talked about that we could do in our classroom would be, for example, in science, having students look at various graphs and comparing and contrasting aspects of the graphs and or interpreting the graphs with a partner. In doing so, students would have to communicate with each other, look for patterns, engage in discussion, draw conclusions, use evidence and reasoning, and discuss the evidence and reasoning that they would be using to back up their claim or whatever trends they were noticing. Students would also have to think about possible data that was missing from their graphs and justifying why that mattered or didn't matter.
I remember this group now. There was somebody in the witness protection program that couldn't.
Yeah.
So let's maybe click on another one and see, does Jeffrey show himself here? There we go.
The common theme that our group chose to concentrate on was combinational thinking, students developing and employing strategies for understanding and solving problems in ways that leverage the power of technological methods to develop and test solutions. Application being planning and carrying out investigations, developing using models, reasoning abstractly, modeling with mathematics. We thought this would be an interesting concept if we were able to give them certain issues pertaining to computational thinking and having them transfer them from discipline to discipline rather than concentrating on a particular issue in one class and have them leaving the classroom and leaving that particular issue behind like they operated in a bubble. But maybe carry that from classroom to classroom. Maybe they take it into their English classroom and they approach it through an ELA lens, and they see how that can be applied in that discipline, carrying the same issue, the same problem, the same concept then to a math class and addressing that from a math perspective. I think by doing this, the students see then that these problem-solving techniques, the ability to use computational thinking is not applied to a specific discipline, but can be then applied across a variety of disciplines and a variety of issues. Hopefully this draws some kind of connectivity in the student's mind between all of the...
Well, that gives you a sense of that. So whether or not you're thinking, oh, I can't wait to get myself on camera and create a Flipgrid, you'll see some more of these, I believe, when we take a look at standards. But it's a kind of a fun, engaging way, either with building staff, with other groups, to be able to share some information, because all of these folks, I don't know how much maybe I didn't share on, what was it, January
23rd, I think.
23rd, I think that was it. When we convened our group, we're working as a statewide effort. Remember, all 9 ESDs linking arms and saying we're going to do this together. And to the greatest extent that we can, on the 23rd, we try to have as many ESDs with us. And so in the morning, we use we use Zoom. And we zoom in, and we have this collective learning day or morning where we're learning with and from folks from other ESDs. So we have these collective group-related activities. We unplug for a little bit. We do some of the Flipgrid, perhaps, come back, we celebrate that, and we do that for the morning. In the afternoon, we unplug from all of that, and we get kind of selfish, and we say, well, what about us? What about the ESD 105 region? What about these districts that are in this room? So we care about the state, we care about beyond the state in the morning. We get kind of selfish and we just turn inward and say, how can we support each other in developing what we want to in our region? What I would like to give you some time to do, maybe just 10 to 15 minutes, is to take a look at one of those sections, one of those sub-themes, and start to explore what would that look like, just like what they were sharing in a classroom. What's an activity that could help to support all of these practices from 3 different areas? What would that look like? And you get to decide, is that at an elementary, middle school? Is that 7th grade? Is that a high school class? But I'd like you to take some time to do that, because that's the tougher work. What would this look like in a classroom? Because if we're gonna help teachers understand collectively, there's some power in doing this, it helps to say, and here's one thought, here's one way. So I'm gonna give you just about maybe 10 or 15 minutes or so, we'll check in at maybe 5 till. Even just whether you write anything down, whether you say, hey, we're gonna actually try the Flipgrid, then we can get you started on that. But I would love to have you just take a little bit of time to start to talk through what would one of these segments look like in a classroom.
So in the morning on the 23rd, during that CS Leads, one of the things that we really focused on was making the computer science standards, which is this lovely, big, confusing packet, is a little bit easier to understand for both our teachers and then also for our students. Make it easier to relate to explain, you know, your learning goals and that kind of stuff. And so we created this lovely sheet here, and it has the standard, and then it has the standards written in a friendly language, and then it has, we did Flipgrid. So it did examples of how to use it in the classroom. And we have it for K2, 3, 5, 6, 8, and then 9, 10. And you can see we're not completely done, so we do still have some in there. But it's that start. It's explaining and talking about how are we actually using these in the classroom, how are we explaining that, and then for when we're starting to introduce this to our teachers, how do we make sure that it's not, here's the packet, and good luck. And it's making sure that it's something that they can see, they can understand, and that they can go through. And so I put in the link on here too to the Flipgrid that we worked on. So there's all of ours. So you can see all of our different explanations, and that's talking about classroom examples. So what did we do? And then the examples we used to how do we bring that standard into the classroom? Just examples that we thought of up on, you know, on the top of our head. But just a really cool tool, especially if you're already using computer science, since a lot of you do that. You can look at those and you can sort of help with your learning goals and that kind of stuff. And then my thought with this is, can we look at these and see which ones, in terms of what we're already offering at Wallaloop, how do we, you know, identify what we're already doing so that we can then start saying, okay, we're done with this. We have this down, but we're really lacking on this side over here. This is what we want to focus on so we can make sure we have that accurate pathway of K through 12. And we're not missing anything, and maybe we'll have to go back and tweak it to make it fit, but it's better than starting from somewhere we already have, especially in this first year of doing it. So the other one, I think this is that one, yeah.
And I have some hard copies of this. Is this you want to scroll and let's just see if it's a 4? Yep. So if you scroll up just a little bit, Angelica, to the top 1 or 2 pages, this document comes from CSTA, the Computer Science Teachers of America. What Shannon did at OSPI, because all last year and this year, we're focusing on computational thinking. We believe that's our best opportunity for an inroad to any classroom. Instead of thinking that we're only talking to the teachers that are currently teaching computer science, then those teachers may be a limited number of students, or, oh, well, I teach the exploratory class. Well, we don't get every kid in that. And if CS for all means for all, then how do we try to get past that, oh, we're doing computer science because that's happening at 7th grade. Or we're doing it because we've got that class at the high school. That what Shannon did was take a look at these, you know, here's our concepts, and down below are our practices. So what you worked on earlier, all of those 7 practices for computer science are listed, and then it's parenthetical, like under algorithms and programming, this sub-concept of control deals with P 5.2, and 5 is creating computational artifacts. So that's how you kind of read through this. And it's by band. So level 1A is ages 5 through 7 at the end of 2nd grade. At the end of 5th grade, 1B, and if you then scroll to the next page down, then there's level 2 and level 3 for by the end of 8th grade and high school. So it's another way. What I love about this, and I'll just stop holding these and maybe distribute these. What I love about this is, where's your packet? What Angelica said earlier, what's the easiest way to have a teacher reach out and say, I'll take that out of your hand? Exhibit A, Exhibit B. So this is a much easier way to get folks talking about, is this more elaborate? Without a doubt. And it has to be because it's 40 pages or more as opposed to 4. But if all I want are folks to be willing to dip their toes in the pool. I just want them to step in and have an open mind to how can I start to do this work. Not only are those 2 pages important, because it looks at those standards across those different bands, but then if you look at pages 3 and 4, our effort the past 2 years has been about computational thinking. And I mentioned them earlier, here are those pillars for computational thinking. If I'm teaching 2nd grade, you can have somebody say, now Larry, you're a 2nd grade teacher and there are computer science standards and you need to be addressing those because we've adopted them. They've been adopted at the state and you need to incorporate those. Oh, that felt good. I could start to look at this to think, if I'm teaching 2nd grade and I know that we're doing a lot right now with patterns, because we find patterns in music, and we find patterns in art, and we find patterns everywhere. Are there some standards here within computer science that I can either go, ooh, I'm doing that. My activity is that one right there. I can start to celebrate that I didn't even know it, and I'm starting to address some computer science standards. And this just becomes awareness. Or I find that I'm doing a couple of these, but I aspire to take on one more. How can I now take one more standard, and maybe it's over in algorithms? Because in my 3rd grade math class, we're dealing with algorithms, steps in a process. So, or if I'm up in the upper elementary now, probably, and multiplying and dividing fractions. Well, there's some procedural steps there that I can deal with, and I can maybe find some ways to incorporate some of these CS standards in that work. So I love this document. This was really Shannon. Shannon took what we knew from CSTA, pages 1 and 2, and then she did a sort to be able to look at which standards could she really stand behind in her thinking to be able to say these standards in this, now you look at these 2 pages differently. Because now here's level 1A by the end of 2nd grade. So those 4 rows deal with that level 1A. Then on page 3 towards the bottom, level 1B, those 4 rows deal with middle school. Or excuse me, up to 5th grade, and then middle school and high school. Although,
is it that simple?
Yeah, she just has some labeling that we have to fix here. Because this is 11 through 14 by the end of grade 8, and she's not grade 8 down here.
Twice.
Yeah, but this would be the middle school. This should be high school.
Yeah.
And so by 14, 16 is high school. We just have to label it a little bit.
It's like grade 10, right?
Yeah. So again, I'm always trying to look for ways to make standards more digestible. And I think this does a great job of that. But I'd like to have, I don't know where you'd like to go next, but just to take a few minutes looking through this and start to have some discussions with your elbow partners. How might we use something like this? Have any of you ever seen this document before? How might they be used? Could this be something that we know there's so much activity going on at a particular grade level? Might they be interested in seeing and celebrating what they've done? Because they are already doing some great work with computer science, computational thinking. They might like to evidence it with some standards. I was a former building administrator. I was doing evaluations, doing observations, and helping teachers with their end of the year evaluation. Wouldn't it be great for teachers to be able to say, and by the way, I'm also incorporating some computer science standards. So I think there's a lot of leverage here from a lot of different angles. I love the one most about what are we doing for kids. But if I have to find another way to say, there's something in it for you as well. If you're looking at going from proficient to distinguished, are there some ways that this helps as you start looking at incorporating some standards beyond what you're doing at your grade or your subject area?
Yeah, so if you're going through those and you're like, that one looks sort of confusing because it still has that computer science language, you can then come here and see if we have sort of imposed it and made it a little bit easier to swallow.
And this is a big task. If we added up all of the people from 9 ESDs, because some of them couldn't be with us on the 23rd, and they were doing their activities separately, and there was no guarantee that they were going to then embrace this and do it as well. But we might have, I don't know, 100 people. So this was the effort of, I don't know how much time we spent, an hour maybe?
An hour and a half.
So I anticipate we'll probably come back to this in March. Our last meeting of the year is March 10th. And I hope that we will, this isn't something you just do once. You go, wow, that was fun. And then you move on to something else. We have to be in it for the long haul. And we have a Zoom meeting tomorrow, so maybe that'll be part of our discussion.
And if you see one that you're doing, you're more than welcome to add to this, please.
I think that's going to be the real power.
Yes.
How do you move a mountain? It's going to take a lot of collective efforts. It's not just those convenience.
Mm-hmm. So go ahead, take a look at this, look at some of those links, see what areas, most of you guys all teach in STEM or computer science or have some kind of computer science component to it. What areas are you already hitting those in some of your classes, and what areas do you think you've already hit in some of the other classes that you know of? So we can start maybe addressing where we need to get started.
Or if you have a colleague in another, I just always go back to elementary. How can we help an elementary teacher if could you go back to the one that shows the computational thinking? And we'll just scroll up just a little bit so we see what's heading. There we go. How do we help teachers embrace, one, are they already doing these things? I bet you they are. Maybe not all 4, but I bet you at least a couple of those pillars. And how can we try to find a way to integrate computer science into some things you're already doing? So it's not really a heavy lift. It's not adding on.
So these are
I think a lot of times it's just finding a partner in the district that has some extra knowledge that can share some of that with me. So how do we then go to some of these other groups and help share the good news?